Welcome back to the Matchbook NFL podcast, our first one of 2025 and our last regular season podcast. We've managed to do this throughout week 1 right up to week 18, so plenty more bets to go. And we're picking off a back of a 2-0 best bet week. We recorded nice and early Monday, which was pre-Christmas Eve, pre the Christmas football, and the guys somehow managed to get 2-0. I say somehow because, Doug, you got the overs up in Bengals and Bengals, actually, my head's gone now, to be honest. Bengals, Broncos, in an absolutely insane, incredible game. Now, notwithstanding some of your own in-play punting, which you can share or not with the listeners, but sum up that game and then maybe backup quarterbacks. We've seen a lot of stuff in week 17 that maybe couldn't steer our betting for week 18.
Yeah, it's these coaches somehow don't understand the concept of timeouts and when to use them in game strategy. I've joked in the past, but now I'm like borderline dead serious about just hiring a fifth grader who plays Madden football enough to understand the math. I mean, they really do not understand things. They even saw it in the Rose Bowl, the Rose Bowl, like coaches wasting timeouts, wasting time, not calling time. They're just not prepared across the board. But how Cincinnati handled the end of that game helped my over pick, which I was a little uneasy having to do your best bet Monday morning for the week, but sometimes it hurts. Like, don't overthink it, just fire. And it got there. I had the fourth quarter under, so could have done without some of the clock mismanagement or even the jump ball on fourth down. But miracle plays, crazy finishes, crazy covers for the favorites. I mean, it's just been a ridiculous run in the NFL for dog players, I know, are just getting crushed.
Well, just on that, Doug, you mentioned money line parlays potentially week 17, 18, which would have seen, I think maybe, was it just the Colts that let the money line parlay down from memory last week? But it just shows you that there was, if you ever are going to pull them off, it's probably week 16 to 18 when teams need to win and just do enough,
I mean, that's the theory. The Colts historically always drop the ball, right? They had the loss by 2 touchdowns at Jacksonville a couple of years ago to end the regular season with Carson Wentz as their quarterback. But overall, it's just one of those years. But, Judah can talk to more about like sample size and certain things. But the game has changed. The market has tightened in a lot of ways, but sometimes the market hasn't caught up to certain aspects. And we also, each year has its own identity, right? Look how many teams are at the bottom of the NFL. How many teams have tied with 3 wins and tied with 4 wins? Just, they're all clumped. We don't really know who the worst teams are. We have an idea, especially with backup quarterbacks playing, things along those lines with some of the bad teams. But, there's a chunk at the top and a bigger chunk at the bottom. And that's sort of the identity of this year, for where we saw carnage with survivor and eliminator pools early on. But then favorites have been the rest of the way, right? These survivor pools, these well-documented ones, have a lot of people left standing. So it's pretty incredible in that regard. But overall, you just got to be, like I had the Giants plus 3.5 as my underdog play, because certain teams, you can kind of get a read. So it's why we like the NFL. It's crazy. But it was certainly a roller coaster week, considering it started on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's what I nearly stuttered at the start. I was like, who were Bengals playing? It feels, Judah, because it's been so spread out, with some drama nearly every night. If games didn't deliver, the following game did. Does anything surprise you? Maybe going back to that Browns-Bengals game. I mean, this is just basic stuff. I was watching it with someone who's never really watched NFL before, explaining how idiotic this was, and the commentator on telly was also saying the same thing. I mean, this is just basic math, as Doug alluded to there.
Yeah, I mean, you just, unless the likelihood of hitting a 29-yard field goal or whatever, or even if they wanted to go down at the 1, the likelihood of hitting a 20-yard field goal is about 99%. Even if you're like, however you want to like 3D chess this, like, you cannot score on second down. Force them to take a timeout. Just like take a knee. There is like no added value in scoring a touchdown there, when you can just run out the clock and kick a extra point. There are basic things that are kind of unambiguous that teams get wrong, which is certainly something. But yeah, I mean, I guess on the flip side of that is I'm kind of happy about that, because it makes for some really entertaining football. and certainly we had that in the Broncos Bengals game, just full of complete madness, and also for the most part, like I think there is a way overemphasis on coaching errors. Like for the most part, obviously there are instances where that's not true, and like that's a particularly bad one because like it is unambiguous. Like things of like fourth down decision making, let's say, is like way less obvious than we'd like to think it is, because any model that's ever used doesn't really know the true success rate of like the Detroit Lions on 4th and 3 relative to kind of like a league average team. Just the sample sizes are not big enough. There's like room for error. This is not one of those cases, and I think a lot of kind of the flack, and like most of the time these plays they do go a long way in deciding games, but like there are also 15 other plays from that game which had a similar effect. And like these things are not predictable in many ways of what teams are going to do. So I just kind of approach this as like a part of the sport, right? Like you got to know this is part of the equation. This is almost the variance of like betting on teams. Part of the handicap is knowing which coaches are more or less likely to do these sorts of things. It is almost another piece of the puzzle, and like you can't be surprised. That's kind of or I should say, you can't be surprised at crazy things happening. Like it is the nature of the sport. It's the nature of kind of betting on the NFL in particular.
Yeah, it's a good point. Some of those fourth down decisions are a lot closer than social media would lead you to believe, based on the outcome, obviously, etc. And the league average versus Lions, well pointed out there, Judah. But this one was, yeah, a 99.9% decision, I would say. But yeah, we're going to cover 3 games. We have a TV game on Saturday, not that competitive, but we will cover Browns at Ravens. And then we got Bengals at Steelers, Vikings at Lions, trying to cover the games that matter or potentially will matter. There are other games, of course, with small things on the line, etc. Insights.matchable.com, you get a full recap of Doug and Judah's picks throughout the season and also this week and into the playoffs. And do check out the Matchup Betting Exchange. You will invariably be getting the tightest margins, betting to basically 100% over round on the betting exchange, but also you can do bet builders and combine some of those insane game parlays whatever way you'd like to bet. You can check out Matchbook in the UK and Ireland. Let's start with Browns at Ravens. This is another rare Saturday outing here. Saturday 9:30 UK time. The Browns are 13.5 on the money line currently, and you can lay that all the way up to 18, so that might be bigger come kickoff time. Ravens 1.06, 17.5 is the point spread, and the head start for the Browns was 18 earlier this morning, and 41.5 is the total over slight favorite there. Doug, we'll start with you on this one. I mean, you've got a couple of selections here, so sometimes it's a game we can bet on, as Judah always says. 17.5. Ravens do need the win here, so you expect them to maybe, I'm guessing, given these couple of selections, get the win, take care of business, and maybe ease up on the finish line as well, though.
Yeah, I think my favorite play here is the under. But I am going to bet the Ravens, and I'm mad I didn't get the better number, and I don't know if it's going to come back. I think Cleveland is really that bad with DTR at quarterback. Now, they mentioned that Bailey Zappi may get a few series or something like that, but he only joined the team in late October, and he's not that good to begin with, but he is much more competent than DTR. I don't understand how DTR is in the NFL. I really don't. The guy has been failing upwards his whole life. He's like that guy in your workplace who just continues to get promotions even though he does nothing. He backed up in quarterback. He backed up a famous quarterback who flamed out in the college. So it's really been one of those weird scenarios. I think we're going to see a similar offensive production or lack thereof that we saw against Cleveland last week. And the Ravens will just stumble into some touchdowns because of who they are and their how they incentive to win the game, right? Like, as you mentioned, Daniel. So I am going to lay the 17.5. I would definitely be much more interested in minus 16.5. But I do think the Browns are just that incompetent. And I do think it's going to be one of those where Baltimore's just going to want to get out of the game, especially if weather wreaks havoc. And, it's just going to be one of these, like, honestly, like 31-6 games. I think it's going to be one of those games.
Yeah, a lot of scenarios where you can cover and get the under if Browns are obviously only contributing maybe 1 score, 2 score max. Judah, there, I'm taking it's not necessarily your game to bet on, although like anything can be value, obviously, no matter how big the number is. You are leaning to, if you had to have a bet, maybe to go for and lay the number here with the Ravens. Is that, yeah, I guess, a bit of both, but pro Ravens, anti Browns, just based on the last few weeks, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of a like play on how points work in NFL games. So just like if you're gonna model things, they're gonna naturally go towards the middle, and like Dorian Thompson-Robinson is an outlier. The reason I think it's a lean is that I think there is actually a pretty marginal difference between Bailey Zappi and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think kind of the bias in all of our heads is like Bailey Zappi bad, Dorian Thompson-Robinson bad, as opposed to just like the gap between these two players is, I don't know if it's an exaggeration to say the gap between Bailey Zappi and like the 7th best quarterback in the NFL is the same as Bailey Zappi and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I mean, this is a guy who is like historically bad. And I just don't know who's going to play. And it's been very, like, it's ambiguous. I earlier in the week thought there was a shot that like Jameis Winston would play, in which case I was like, oh, I think there's actually a lot of value on 17.5, but that was very quickly shut down. I certainly won't be on the under in this game. And that's because, I mean, this is a Ravens team that's an absolute house. The Browns defense has been a disaster for a couple of months now. Certainly in defending explosive plays, they haven't been able to generate pressure. Myles Garrett missed practice. He already got, I think there was some sack milestone he got last week. Denzel Ward missed last week. He missed practice. Again, this is just a disaster of a defense. And if Dorian Thompson-Robinson is playing, I mean, maybe this game goes under just by like the Ravens running the ball and keeping it on the ground, and like they aren't as explosive as I anticipate. But I think this is a team which has a really good shot at scoring 35 points pretty easily. And if the Browns can do anything on offense, and I think they'll be at least somewhat competent with Bailey Zappi, right? The difference of like, I don't know, 17 points versus 13 points in projection. Like that goes a long way in determining these numbers. I would lean Ravens here. It is obviously not the sexiest of spots, but this is a team that can put up points.
Yeah, and look, Judah, we should be grateful for these games now, because in 5-6 weeks' time, that'll be it for the NFL season. So we always like urge people, especially listening, watching, enjoy these games, especially when it comes to playoff times. But yeah, lean for Judah, quite strong one, I would say, overall. But Doug, happy to lock in Ravens, laying the points and under, and you can, of course, that is strongly correlated, I guess, if you did want to same game parlay them both on the matchbook bet builder. Let's move on to essentially what is Saturday night football here. It's Bengals at the Steelers, and that incredible finish, I guess, thank God it went the ways of Bengals, gives us something else to talk about in week 18. The Bengals 183 money line favorites to the Steelers are 2.14. That market might move based on the previous game. We'll talk about that in a second. Steelers plus 1.5 at 2.0, and the total for this game is 48. Well, Judah, maybe to throw that theory to you, I guess, obviously when the Ravens inevitably win, that might incentivize the Steelers a bit. Will that move the market at all, do you think? Maybe half a point or before this game kicks off?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I mean,
okay,
first off, like the market's basically pricing in
that's it. It's the win, isn't it? Yeah,
Ravens win. This is one of the bigger money lines I think I've seen since I was like really paying attention to the magnitude of a money line. It's like 90-something%. It's crazy. But also like the Steelers are still playing for the difference between the 6 and the 5 is massive. And certainly if you want to talk about like, I don't know, coach type, like football mentality type things, like they're certainly prepping because they feel like they have to win. But like going to play the Texans versus playing the Ravens again is huge. And I think they'll be going all out regardless. But I don't know if that's going to matter. I think this is a Bengals team, which, I mean, even if you just look at like the initial release of the props, like Joe Burrow's effectively implied to throw for 300 yards, which is just bananas. And like, can the Steelers defense shut them down via the pass rush? Yeah, maybe. And that's kind of like, that's Burrow's Achilles heel. That is where he was struggling. He was taking a lot of sacks against Denver. But also, even when he was taking the sacks, they're still moving the ball. And this is a Steelers secondary which just cannot keep up with the Bengals wide receivers. I think in the first matchup of these teams, Russell Wilson, like he threw for 400 yards and his depth of target was like 5 yards. It's the basically only game he's had success on non-deep passes. I think it was pretty much an outlier. I mean, the running backs combined for I want to say like 150 yards receiving. if they can do that, like, yeah, they'll be in it. But I think that's precisely the sort of like outlier game they need to beat the Bengals, and I don't think that's sustainable. I just lean on the relative certainty of the Bengals offense, which has been probably the best in the NFL with both Higgins and Chase healthy. They're going up against the Steelers defense, which loves to play man. They do not have the personnel on the back end to defend the Bengals wide receivers. Russell Wilson's a variance machine. Like, can the Steelers win? Of course. If I'm trying to think of what's most likely to happen, I think it's that the Bengals score, and the Steelers are kind of a mixed bag of like they get a couple quick strikes, but a lot of their drives also stall out via sacks and just some general worse quarterback play. I'm on the Bengals here at what's very close to a pick 'em here.
Okay, and there's a couple of ways you can go about it. Money line -1.5 enough for you, given it could be a field goal in it?
I'll take the -1.5 here.
Yeah.
I think there are plenty of game scripts, and I do not think we're going to see many of just one.
Yeah.
Or a game that lands on one, I should say.
Yeah, well, look, a miss point after touchdown could be the one. Who knows? Doug, over to you for this one. I guess you agree with everything you just said in terms of Bengals offense, but I guess you expect, or at least hoping, the Steelers can do more offensively themselves to land this over at 48, which is around even money.
Yeah, I think Cincy's defense is just that bad. They've been now. Look, the last week's game should have gone under, but I do think the Steelers are going to be prioritizing their offense. They understand that they need to stretch the offensive game with Pickens back and things like that. Like the variance is there. That's obvious, but I think the Bengals defense sort of opens up that component and sways teams. I mean, they're so explosive offensively, so bad defensively. There was a stretch where Cincy was getting better defensively, but really, you can move the ball pretty easily on this team. And I wonder if there's a chance the Steelers may just stick to the run and not want to get into a shootout, but eventually that may not be an option. So I would definitely not want to do first half over, but I think we do see some points throughout the course. I think the second half could get going if the game script follows a certain script that I think it would.
Okay, we'll lock those bets in. Doug on over 48, and Judah happy to lay the 1.5 for the Bengals. Let's move on to Vikings at Lions. What a game to finish off week 18 here. We've got Vikings at 2.4 underdogs to the Lions in Detroit at 164. Vikings 3-point head start at 193. And the total for this game is, wait for it, 55.5, like the good old days from a couple of years ago. And Doug, on that, I mean, I have seen the last few weeks, we're seeing some of these big games just fly over with some of these high totals. This is 55.5, but obviously this is for the one seed. How important is that for someone maybe half tuning in throughout the NFL season?
I mean, it's massive. Just the way the structure of the league is, that the Vikings could have this ridiculous record and be the bottom seed or one of the bottom seeds is insane. Or actually, sorry, not just the Vikings, the loser of this game. And rarely do we see three teams in one division have these kind of records, but we do. And the drop off is really noticeable. I mean, Vikings could be a 14-3 team, or sorry, the Lions too, 14-3 and not have a bye. It's just insane. And then have to go on the road in the playoffs. So it's massive. And I typically like underdogs in revenge spots. So, right, Minnesota lost earlier this year at home. Now the Vikings are a different animal, right? Their coach is certainly a different animal. I do wonder that we see teams get up for big games. It's really hard to continue being up for games. And I wonder if the short week and going to San Francisco and playing so hard and playing that kind of mentality, you just sort of lose your edge because you just can't do it week in and week out, in my eyes. But the Lions seem to, and that's what was so impressive of this team is even with expectations, they were just crushing the point spread. And week in and week out, the flat spot never came. Teams kept betting into this Detroit team, but the flat spot never came. However, I do think the Vikings are the right side here. I think the Detroit defense is that vulnerable. And frankly, like 3 points may come into play. Dan Campbell goes for it so much. And what's ironic is he should have gone for 2 at the end of the last game to go up by 14. It never did because I don't think he really fully understands the math of all this. He just goes on gut. So I'll take 3 points with the guy who's going to win Coach of the Year, and that defense I think can give Goff some problems. But look, Detroit continues to prove people wrong in terms of beating the point spread. So, there's no real reason why it should happen this week. And I just think I want the 3 points in my pocket in this kind of a game.
Okay, yeah, and the podcast isn't great, Judah, when we're largely agreeing with each other. But you're agreeing here on the right side. Maybe you might take money line over +3, but aside from that, you're on the same side here.
Yeah, I wouldn't take +3, especially not in a
money
game with
line.
a total like this. I would be I'm on the Vikings side also. I think that the Lions pass defense, I don't think it's an exaggeration, in their current form might be the worst pass defense in the NFL. And I think when you think about the style of play that the Lions utilize, it is a very, very heavy man coverage. They lead the NFL in man coverage. They play a lot of single high safety, which means that they are allowing you almost to throw deep against them, inviting those explosive plays, forcing a longer depth of target. And that worked earlier in the season when they had their personnel all healthy. They were very aggressive. They forced a lot of turnovers. That's not a coincidence. This is kind of this sort of variance that you undergo as you play a lot of these man coverage and single high units. But as the entire team gets hurt, you're now forced to rely on some weak corners to win one-on-one matchups. And that's not exactly a recipe for success. And they've been eviscerated by all of their opponents over the last month, since basically everyone went down. I mean, Caleb Williams was torching them up 2 games. Obviously, that Bills game, they could not stop anything. Even the Niners, it was 2 Brock Purdy turnovers that were the difference from the Niners scoring on virtually every single drive. This defense is atrocious and a horrific matchup for on the Lions side for against Minnesota, which is a team that is like precisely going to take advantage of weak defenses. That's where they've been great. Sam Darnold, when kept clean, has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. This has been a theme throughout Kevin O'Connell's tenure of his quarterback has dominated when staying in structure. And you're asking Terrion Arnold to go one-on-one with Justin Jefferson. That is a disaster waiting to happen in my eyes. And I think that they will be able to move the ball virtually at will against this Lions defense. And sure, there can be turnovers. That's always in the cards. This is not a slam dunk. I'm not investing the entirety of my net worth on this football game. But I think there's a lot more that can go wrong on the Lions side. They obviously have kind of the higher base rate of offensive success, but the Vikings are a way better defense. Can the Lions beat them in the run game? Of course. I think the Vikings also are going to be a little bit more fraudulent in their run defense than their full numbers will suggest, but they also now finally have both their linebackers healthy. That should certainly help in stopping the run. And Jared Goff has been great against the blitz. It's a small sample. He has not been great against the Lions blitzes. And I think there's just a lot more that can go wrong on the Lions side, especially when the expectations are such that the Lions are starting with a kind of 3-point head start here. I like the Vikings.
Okay, so depends which way you want to tackle this. Safer option +3 if you have that maybe 1 point swing, 1.93 for Doug, and money line at 2.4 taking the higher price for Judah. Any other bets time? We just have one here selection, Judah, which leads in nicely to your long shot. So if you want to take this as one, obviously, I mean, the Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys, if you said you were going to ultimately lay 13.5 in a long shot, I'd say it'd be any price you like in week 1. But here we are, Judah.
Yeah, I would kind of be shocked if this game closes at 4.5. I wrote this up earlier in the week. It was 3.5, and I was still kind of shocked that Washington, I think, is going to be playing at full strength. This is a team looking to kind of maintain their seeding or even go up. To maintain their 6th seed, which would be a matchup against Tampa or LA, rather than go into Philly. And just with the nature of how the NFC is playing, anyone can beat anyone. And I think you kind of want to maintain that higher seed. All that is just to say that I expect Washington to continue to play, and the The strength of the Cowboys defense is their pass rush. That like they were probably they're playing at the worst defense in the NFL when Micah Parsons was hurt. It's a secondary that's allowing more separation than anyone else. They couldn't generate pressure without him. He's back. He obviously can wreck any game. But Jaden Daniels has been a completely different quarterback in the last 3 to 4 weeks as he was in kind of the middle chunk of the season when he was dealing with that rib injury. His scramble rate went from about 15%. It has skyrocketed to 25%. He's been a completely different quarterback. His scramble run rate, i.e. the percentage of runs when he scrambles, has gone way back up to where it was in the first couple weeks of the season. Washington's had a ton of success off of that. And those are precisely the traits which can kind of mitigate a pass rush insofar as you can do those sorts of things. And on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys offense is a complete disaster. I don't know who's playing quarterback. I think we could very well see Trey Lance here. But they have no one to get open right now. Jalen Tolbert has been in the NFL for a couple of years. He's been one of the worst separators, relying on mid-30s Brandon Cooks to generate anything, giving snaps to Jonathan Mingo. They have no one on offense to generate separation. They don't have much of a passing game now without CeeDee Lamb. And I think Washington should be able to throw or run virtually at will against this Dallas team. And Washington puts up points. That's what they do. And I'm not sure that Dallas can keep up. I am more than comfortable laying some pretty wide margins here in a game that I fully anticipate Washington to be playing all out. And on the Cowboys side, I think they're experimenting. I think we'll see some Trey Lance here. I think they'll try and give some run to a lot of their younger players. I think this is a spot for Washington to win on the alts.
Okay, I'm liking it. Yeah, we're locking in Commanders -4.5 at Cowboys as the main bet 191. Long shots though, Commanders -13.5 at just under 4.0. That's 3.9 at the time of recording. And Doug, in some ways you landed the 2.78 shot, I think, on the Giants +3.5. There was more in you. The money line was there for you, but you just couldn't quite grasp it. And I guess that's playing a little factor here in maybe taking the 3.5 on the Rams money line versus the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I don't really understand why they're favored by so much. And obviously the line we're adjusting is 6.5 and not 10.5, like whatever the Colts was. I forget last week. But in general, like I don't understand why the Seahawks are such big favorites. Like I know the Rams are sitting Matthew Stafford, which I don't understand it in general, but the Rams have plenty to play for in this game, and Garoppolo is not bad in terms of he's obviously been a starter. He was almost Super Bowl MVP one year if Mahomes doesn't complete a third and a mile. And I think McVay showed what he can do with backup quarterbacks at the end of their career. He did it with Wentz, I believe, and he also did it with Baker Mayfield. And I think the right coaching with Garoppolo and some of the weapons, and the Seahawks have nothing to play for. So this just strikes me as a weird line to begin with what Seattle is favored by. So if we're looking at long shot value, I agree with what Judah was saying. I didn't think of the favorite going up adjusted like he sometimes does. I do like the money line here. I think the Rams at home against a Seahawks team that's been eliminated, let it rip. I mean, we don't know what kind of mindset the Seattle team's going to be in.
Okay, liking it. Rams money line 3.5 and Commanders -13.5 at the Cowboys 3.9 is our long shots. 2-0 on the best bets last week, which has been a feature this season, in fairness to both Doug and Judah, we talked about this. You made a great case. Vikings money line eking out that extra value 2.4 at the Lions. You think they can go into Detroit and get the 1 seed?
Yeah, I think this is a Vikings offense which should be able to win their one-on-one matchups. TJ Hawkinson's been incredible against man coverage. Obviously, you have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. The Lions, I don't think, have the personnel to defend that, nor do they have the pass rush right now. They've been bottom 5 in quick pressure rate since virtually the entirety of their defensive line went down. I think this is a spot where Minnesota is going to be able to stay in structure, where Darnold's been great. And they're a defense that is just far, or I should say has as good a shot as anyone to slow down this Lions offense. And even if they don't, I think the offenses can go toe-to-toe. Getting this at 2.4 on the money line, I think, is a valuable bet given the state of the Lions defense right now.
Okay, I like it. 2.4. And finally, Doug, the Jags, you're taking on the Colts once more this week, one final time, week 18, to make it pay. And Jags are getting a 5-point head start in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I don't really understand this line either. What kind of mindset does Indy have? I mean, there's these reports of blowing up the front office, the coaching staff. They're a hot mess. Richardson's banged up. Like they just laid the giant egg against the Giants and blew their playoff chances. So, what kind of mindset will we have in the last game? Like, is this really a locker room that reflects like they're gonna try to go out on the right note and all this stuff, or a team that's just or locker room or team, whatever you want to say, that's coming apart at the seams. Meanwhile, Jacksonville, not anything to write home about per se. I mean, they're not good, but they've been competitive in their last few games. Just beat Indy. Was somewhat competitive here in Vegas against the Raiders. Had the games that went down to the wire with the Jets and Titans as well. So they're 2-2 in their last 4. They took the Texans to a field. I mean, they've been competitive in their last 5. I think this is a team that, I'm comfortable thinking they're going to play hard. And I can't say that for sure with the Colts.
Okay, Jags +5, the final selection of the regular season at 191, alongside Judah's Vikings money line at 2.4. My thanks to both the guys throughout the regular season. We will be back for playoffs. We've got 4 more podcasts left to go. It is super wild card round next week, one of my favorite weekends of the year. A lot of unpredictability. We will cover all 6 games in the main slate to see if guys don't have to have an opinion on all the games, but just to give you some leans towards bets for all 6 games. So tune in for that next Wednesday. That's 3:30 the usual time, UK time live, and we'll be out as a podcast in all the usual places. But enjoy the last week of the regular season, and we will chat to you for Super Wildcard Weekend. Bye bye.